One of the building blocks of visual design is contrast. Now the word you see here, C-R-A-P, CRAP, is short for contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, which would be your four big building blocks for creating a product that stands out. Now this is based on a book by Robin Williams, not the comedian, but Robin Williams, and the book's called The Non-Designer's Design Book. And so these principles are applied by a lot of people out there. And so the first element that we're going to look at is contrast. Now, contrast is things or are things which look different from one another. So if you're going to make something different, if two items aren't the same and you want to make them different, make them really different. And so as you can see here, white on black would be a strong contrast. There are different types of contrast and value. So this would be one. I mean, it's contrast both in color and in value. So the level of contrast is quite high. Now, if you take a look at this image, you'll see that we have contrast to a certain degree. The value here would be a living object or a living thing versus a non-living thing. So dog versus stuffed animal. That would also be a contrast, and the colors are also contrasting. Now, contrast and value could be they can be objects. So in this case here, you may have seen a television ad of an airplane landing, or it showed that the front landing gear was not working right, and it landed in the bed of a Nissan Titan truck. Well, that is quite a contrast, having a plane and a truck work side by side to properly land the plane. That's a contrast in value. So that got a lot of attention. So we have contrast in color as well. The white versus the black is a contrast in color. And if you look at these two colors, they contrast. Are they attractive? Well, that'll be subjective. That is really up to you. I am personally not a fan of this red on green, but it is nevertheless a contrast. So there are tasteful and distasteful contrasts, and again, that's really all up to the person who's looking at it. And so, if you take a look at this image here, you'll see that we have contrast in color. So the knife, the purple knife into the squash. We have a contrast in color here. So basically a black background with the egg timer that's sort of lit up. We have a contrast in color here. We have our shadows versus our lights. Take a look at this one. Very much contrasting colors here. And so design firms use contrast and color regularly. It's one of the more prominent ones, and in this case this is an ad by a design firm here in New Brunswick, and on their website they're using contrast here to your eyes are drawn to this part of the page, and then of course you're looking at the different logos that you have here. So you're drawn here first. This is contrast in color as well. In this case, this is Chiat Day, a design firm, or basically a marketing firm out of LA and New York. And this is their staff, sort of their staff page, basically. You click on them, you get their biographies, but you see that they stand out. We also have contrast and size here. So contrast and size, as opposed to color, it's things which look different from one another. And so if you take a look at this, we have some contrasting colors, but we also have quite a large frame with a very small and in focus object. So the stick and the bug. We have contrast and size here on a web page. We have large text here, we're drawn probably to this first, and then eventually our eyes are drawn over to these ones here that are a little bit smaller. We have contrast and texture. If you take a look at the texture here, this is just an example, but I have a background here that sort of pebbly or sort of concrete, I guess you could say, with contrasting with the wood. And if we take a look at images, we have a contrast here. We have the pesto versus the smoothness of the glass, an out of focus background. So we do have some contrast and texture here, also color. And back to these oranges, we have the texture of the oranges versus the smooth texture of the plate. Also, the outline of the plate has this sort of crisscross pattern. So we have texture there as well. Here's another image that shows you texture, what that can look like, what really stands out. We have the texture here of the Nikon camera strap versus, and it's got a certain texture versus the background texture here. And this is from a website. If you visit this one later on, space150.com, as you move your pointer on and off the screen, the texture of this object changes. And another one here, we have a contrast and texture. This is from Buffalo Wild Wings, a restaurant, and they're using sort of a scoreboard pattern here in the background. And your attention is brought to this part of the screen here we also have contrast and size. Another one here, landscaping firm in Fredericton. They are using a little bit of different texture here as far as the background goes. It's a little hard to see on this page, but you see that this is sort of crisscrossed out on the left and on the right. So your eyes are drawn to this part of the screen first. And then we have contrast and subject. Well, the subjects here are quite different. I mean, where are your eyes drawn to? Likely the rubber duck, simple as that. Contrast and subject here, we have the same subject, which is a cactus, but we have a flower, a cactus flower coming out. And so your eyes are drawn to the flower versus the subject of the cactus here. There's not much to look at with a cactus, but the flower really stands out. Here's another contrast and subject. We could say the contrast here is male versus female, machine versus nature. Again, we have our contrast in size as well. So they're where your eyes drawn to first. Probably not here at the bottom of the page, probably not here, but right here somewhere in the middle. Here's another contrast and subject. This is from Halifax Cycle Gallery's website. Your contrast here could be, again, machine versus nature. It could be the baskets versus the bike. But your eyes are drawn to the bikes here first. And again, then we have some sizing. And here the contrast isn't very great, the orange or yellow on that light sort of khaki color, I guess you could say. So there's a little lack of contrast here. Anyway, that gives you a little idea of what contrast is, and in the next exercise I'd like you to take a look and see what types of contrasts you're looking at, if you can identify them.